Well, hello, everybody. It is Friday night, and it's the start of monsoon season. Happy monsoon season, everyone.
Happy monsoon season.
So I know Carl's excited about monsoon season. Carl, tell me that little factoid that monsoon season has swept in the abundant rain into Tucson's area today. What have you gotten so far for rain?
Oh, 0.01, 1/100th of an inch at 6:20 p.m., but that does break our 106-day dry streak. So we're looking for more. We need it.
That is a great way to bring in the monsoon season with 100th of an inch. So we've had a great time this week. I got my picture here. Let me oh, not that picture. Okay, here it is. Let me show you this, of all the stuff that we've covered this week. And the interesting thing about this monsoon week is that we've basically had all of the monsoon threats in this week. It's been very impressive. And but basically we started on Monday. We talked about heat. On Tuesday, we talked about downburst winds and blowing dust. Wednesday, we talked about lightning. And yesterday we talked about flash flooding. So that was everything that we had this week. Those are most of the big threats. We didn't even touch on things like fire weather and the associated kind of threats that we have with those different threats, because we've had fire weather, we talked about flash flooding associated with the burn scars that I know that Albuquerque and we have in El Paso's area of responsibility. We have a big concern with that right now. I'm trying to load up the Facebook page, and it doesn't look like we're broadcasting on Facebook, which will make me sad, but that's just the way it is. So basically, we've had a great week going over all of the different monsoon threats, and I did want to kind of highlight. It's interesting how the monsoon threats that we went over are all on a national average. Some of your biggest, detriments to people's lives. I guess the biggest killers. We talked about heat, and that's probably the number one. And then we talked about flooding. That includes flash flooding and flooding. And then we also talked about lightning and a little bit about the wind, the downburst winds, and blowing dust always seems to get several people each year as well. And that, I don't know where that falls on this particular graph, maybe under wind or something. But I guess I'm going to run down the line. And you know what? I've just blown in here. No pun intended. I forgot to introduce myself in case there's somebody new. My name's Tim Bryce. I am a forecaster with the National Weather Service here in El Paso, Texas. Let me introduce all the other panelists. I got way ahead of myself, and I apologize to everybody here on the panel. I get excited. So let me run down the line here. We got Todd Shoemake. He's forecaster up in Albuquerque. He's an awesome photographer. If you ever, where can they find your pictures?
ToddShoemake.com. ToddShoemake.com.
Very good. He takes some awesome pictures. So you want to see pictures of the monsoon season? Check out his stuff. All right. Also joining us on the call is John Fawcett. He's the meteorologist. I almost said WCM. Not anymore. Not for a long time. He's our warning coordinator, or he's our MIC meteorologist in charge for the El Paso office. And then coming on down the line over in Phoenix is James Saltel. How are you, James?
Good. How you doing, Tim? Good to see you guys again.
Good to see you. It does look like we finally got it up on Facebook, so that's good. And finally, my favorite forecaster with his favorite name, Carl Soniglia. Yay!
You got it! Yay.
I got it. I won't tell you how I had to write it down to get it to say it right, but that doesn't matter as long as I said it right. All right. Carl, thank you also for joining us. He's a forecaster over in Tucson. We did finally get it up on Facebook and going, so that's great. I did want to say, if you have any questions about anything we've talked about this week as far as the Monsoon Awareness Week, whether it's heat, flash flooding, lightning, blowing dust, downburst winds, any of those, feel free. You can tweet at us using the hashtag Monsoon 2018, Or if you're watching along on Facebook, just like Xavier, Susie, Diana, Gloria, and Joseph, even Donna Sanchez is watching. She's a former EM in Sierra County. So quite a group watching just on Facebook as well. So if you want to ask a question on Facebook or on via Twitter with our hashtag, I'd be more than happy. The whole panel would be more than happy to answer any of your questions. So let me run on down the line because we covered a lot this week. And Todd, I know nobody here was on for every call, but what was one of the highlights that you, as you saw things floating by on Twitter or on different Facebook posts from the different offices, what was one of the takeaways you took from this week of Monsoon Awareness Week?
Well, I think one of the takeaways that I have is just that the public generally is interested in weather. And then two, they're also generally interested in public safety. And so that makes me very happy as a meteorologist. I mean, we talk about these weather hazards, and sometimes you're wondering, is anybody listening to us? Is anybody taking this message seriously? So it's great to get some feedback and hear that people are enthusiastic about the weather, but at the same time, they know there are hazards. And so that's what I like to hear.
It's true. And we're going to get into that a little bit here because all the monsoon threats that we talk about are, I'm not going to say they're all the time, every time preventable, but almost all of the time you can prevent being impacted by these in a serious way. We're all impacted in a little way, but in a serious, kind of life-threatening way. You can take actions to protect yourself from flash flooding, from heat, from lightning, even from the blowing dust. We went over extensively all the blowing dust safety, the driving safety that's associated with blowing dust. So it's great that people are paying attention. It's great that people are getting themselves educated, and that's how it all starts. And as we saw, like we were talking about on the trend for lightning fatalities, there's been a definite downturn in the number of lightning fatalities we've seen over the last few years, and that's great because people are taking lightning a little more seriously. When they hear the thunder roars, they go indoors. And they're remembering their safety tips that, it's safe in a car, it's safe in a building, things like that. So just like Todd said, it's very good that people are interested in this and they're taking proactive measures to kind of protect themselves and their families. John, what was one takeaway you had for this week?
Well, I really appreciate the way all the offices in the Southwest are on board with this type of thing. It's and you hear the subtle differences from office area to office area, but it's all generally the same. One thing I did hear, not during these hangouts, but on the street, people are still calling thunderstorms monsoons. And that's not the case. The monsoon is a pattern that facilitates these thunderstorms, brings the moisture in. But, I don't know if we're ever going to totally get over that. And, monsoon season doesn't mean the monsoon begins June 15th. Mm-hmm. And yet this year might be one of those times, little bit of cheating from tropical moisture input from a dying hurricane. But, hey, we'll take it.
We will. And like you said, we talked about former tropical hurricane or former Hurricane Bud. This Bud's for you, I guess, for the Southwest. But in this case, how it's so early in the season. On the couple of the calls before, a couple of the hangouts, we talked about how we cannot remember a tropical system affecting the Southwest this early in the season. It's not unusual for us to get a tropical system, but it's the pattern kind of evolves to where that's much more likely to occur sometime in like September. But it's kind of unusual. I'd say between all of us, we could not remember this happening this early in the year. So we will take, matter of fact, let me, I got the radar up for the area of the Southwest, and you can see some of that moisture working its way in now as we speak. We've got a big plume of moisture just coming up just south of southern New Mexico. It's already streaming into eastern Arizona. Western Arizona is getting a little things popping up, little thunderstorms. We've had stuff popping up in our mountains, and I know Albuquerque, Flagstaff, Vegas, they're all waiting for their turn next. And I'm afraid that, San Diego, Los Angeles, and probably a lot of Phoenix is going to miss out on a lot of this moisture. But we all take our turns. I don't know how many times one of the things we talked about, how that monsoon plume, and basically it's just this plume of moisture a lot of times during the year, where you've got the low pressure off to your west and the high pressure off to your east, and it just brings all that moisture up out of either the Gulf of Mexico or northern Mexico or the Baja Peninsula area off the Pacific. And that plume tends to drift. It'll drift as, towards Midland, come across New Mexico, go over towards Arizona, even as far west as like the mountains in San Diego's area responsibility in Southern California. And then it goes way far north. I don't know how far does anyone know off the top of your head how far north that plume of moisture can reach? If I had to guess, I think pretty far north.
Southern Canada. It can reach southern. I lived in Coeur d'Alene during my high school years, and you would get these surges of moisture every now and then coming up around the upper high, and we loved it because that's during the dry time of year there. We loved it.
And just for those of you who aren't real good with maps, Coeur d'Alene is in what state?
Northern Idaho, not the potato part, the forested lakes and everything up north.
Wait, there's other parts of Idaho?
What?
Just kidding. Okay, so moving on down the line, we'll ask James now. What was your one takeaway? You were actually in most of the Hangouts this week. What was your one takeaway this week from all of our Hangouts?
Well, my big takeaway was that people really appreciate it this year even more because we actually had an impending weather system. Hurricane Bud and the remnants of Hurricane Bud forecast to move in about the same day as the beginning of the monsoon season. So that generated a lot of extra interest. And I think people really enjoy learning about the main hazards of monsoon season. For example, heat, downburst winds, lightning, and flash floods. And all of these monsoon hazards are being taken more and more seriously because I think people are starting to have a better understanding of the reach of these hazards. And the more you think of these monsoon hazards in terms of their potential reach, I think the more you have to really respect them. For example, how far can downburst winds reach? They can reach dozens of miles. And that dust could create a severe driving hazard. Your visibility could drop to zero. But what's the other thing about dust? Well, dust can also give you a disease called valley fever that people here in the valley have been known to catch, and it happens by breathing in dust during a dust storm. So, they say when the thunder roars, go indoors. Well, during a dust storm, you want to go indoors too. You definitely don't want to be outside breathing that dust. And so what about lightning? What's the reach of lightning? Well, they say when the thunder roars, go indoors. And normally you can start hearing thunder within about 2 miles is when you start to hear it. And that means that, beyond 2 miles, there's a lot of thunderbolts that you're not going to hear. But you certainly can see farther than 2 miles. So if you see some flashing lightning, I'll take it a step further. If the lightning flashes, go indoors, if it looks like it's kind of close enough, you might see lightning bolts 2.5 to 5 miles away. You might want to get indoors because how far can lightning reach? Well, lightning can strike you 5 to 10 miles away. So if you can see it, it might already be in range, even if you don't hear it. But certainly when you hear it, that's going to be your last warning right there. You better really get indoors at that point. And then flash floods, certainly you can get flash floods when there's clear skies above, especially if you're out in the high country or in the foothills. You might just see maybe the top of a thunderhead beyond a mountain or beyond a hill, and you just barely see the top of it. But it may actually be a lot closer than you think. And if you're in valleys and washes, you might want to start hiking in higher terrain, because there's plenty of examples where flash floods came from out of the blue and where people didn't realize that the storms were close enough to start flooding.
Exactly. And it comes down a lot of times to people taking the responsibility, just being a weather aware. I totally get, you're out at the pool, you're out hiking, or you're just out driving around, and you're not meteorologists like we are. We're always kind of tuned into the weather, but when you need to be at least aware of some of those signs. If you see buildups, like James said, if you hear thunder, one of the things that the struggles that the deaf community has had, because with the saying, when thunder roars, go indoors, it doesn't really apply to the deaf community. And they've had to come up with a different slogan. I think it says, when you see a flash, you better dash, or something like that. So they've had to adjust that because, like James said, you don't always hear the thunder. If the lightning's far enough away, you could still see it, especially at night. And that's one of the beauties that I love about the desert Southwest, is that at night, almost every night during the monsoon season, you can see lightning somewhere. Some days it's closer to you, some days it's further away. But it comes back to people just being aware of the weather. And as a forecaster, what I do is I come into the weather office and I say, what's the main threat of the day? And, try to focus in on that. Earlier this week, the main threat was heat. Then as we move through the week and we start to get a little moisture in here, the main threat was, downburst winds. And now as we finish out the week with all this moisture coming up from the former hurricane, clearly the main threat's going to be rain, maybe even a heavy rain and flash flooding. So, you in the public need to kind of just be tuned in. We all of our offices, we put out tweets and Facebook posts, kind of giving clues to what the most significant weather is going to be, and you just need to be aware. Is today a day where I need to be worried about thunderstorms? Is today a day where I need to have extra water with me because it's going to be extra hot? Just be aware and take those 1 or 2 extra precautions to keep you and your family safe. But I want to ask Carl, what was one of his takeaways from Monsoon Awareness Week that he's seen as we did all these different promotions?
Well, the wide variety of hazards that we have associated with the monsoon season, and the fact that you can, as we saw this week, we've got pretty much all the hazards covered within this week, but on any given day during the monsoon season, you come in on a shift, you could have almost all those hazards occurring on that day. There's been times where we've dealt with flash flooding at the same time where, we're sending a haboob toward Phoenix for, with love from Tucson type of thing. So you can have them all coincident with generated by the same storm or same complex or within a small area on the same day. And that's something we also need to be aware of.
Definitely. I talked about knowing what the threat of the day is, but in certain cases, the threat of the day may change. And, I've seen a few times where we've been super duper hot, and that's been enough to pop up thunderstorms. And then we're pretty dry, on those days. So all of a sudden you go from a threat of heat. Then you got thunderstorms, which are usually dry as we begin the monsoon season. And then you'll get those downburst winds and you get blowing dust. So like Carl said, in one day, you could actually have almost all of these kind of threats. But I do encourage people. And one of the things that you can do is have what's called a safety kit ready. And that is one thing you and the public can do to kind of have things ready. And the Weather Service kind of has these ideas of what you need in there, and includes enough food and water for 72 hours. You need a flashlight with some fresh batteries, first aid kit. Hey, you need some cash, because it's been my experience that if we had a significant weather event, electricity goes out, and guess what? Those ATM machines don't work without electricity. So can openers, some medicine, especially if you have a specific need for a medicine. But that is something that you can do as we begin to move in. Say this week when it's Monsoon Awareness Week, you can say, hey, I'm going to pull out my safety kit. Hey, I'm going to check it out. I'm going to get new batteries put in the flashlight. I'm going to make sure I've got enough water, and just so that you're ready to go. As far as that's something that you can do to help your family be ready. I know that in mountainous terrain where they have the threat of forest fires, they have their go kits. They have all of their important papers. They have a change of clothes, a suitcase, just ready to go in case a wildfire breaks out. And we've seen that happen several times everywhere from San Diego across Arizona into southern New Mexico. We've seen these wildfires break out this year. And then, of course, after the wildfires go out, then we have the threat of flash floods, and that's what we're looking at for today. I know Albuquerque has issued flash flood watches for some of their burn scars. We have a flash flood watch out for our western part of our area, and I know Tucson, they got 1/100 of an inch, but hopefully more rain on the way. We talked earlier to people on Facebook, and I was hoping that we could get some light to moderate, maybe even occasionally moderate to heavy rain, but it would be that kind of rain where it came down for 2 or 3 tenths an hour, and then we'd take a break, and then we get another one, and it would just all soak in. Because one thing we didn't really talk about is, and I'll see if I can track it down here as I'm talking about, but is the drought that's continuing to ongoing across all of the Southwest. Is that we've had a pretty serious drought situation going on. And I know that the moisture from bud that we are getting isn't going to completely end the drought, but hopefully it'll put a dent in it. So here you go across our area. You can still see across a big hunk of Arizona and northern New Mexico, they're in what's called the D4 exceptional drought. And basically on a scale of 1 to 5, that's a 5. It doesn't get much worse than that. And all of Arizona is either a 3, 4, or 5, and most of New Mexico. So right now we've been looking at drought, and as is not uncommon, sometimes you end your drought with a big flood. So we'll have to see what happens over the next 24 hours, but I'm very hopeful that we can all get some beneficial moisture in the next 24 hours. I'm keeping an eye here on Facebook. Lots of comments on just the variety of weather that we've had. Like we mentioned, the people were talking about how they've gotten some rain today. Earlier, let's see, it was Diana mentioned that she had blowing dust yesterday. We had lightning, and then earlier in the week, we had heat. So like we've said, it was one of these weeks where you needed to be ready for all of those threats. Some weeks it's maybe just thunderstorms. Some weeks it's just heat. But this week, like we said, had it all. Okay, I'm going to go down the line. I want everyone's predictions for this monsoon season. And basically, when I say predictions, are we going to have above normal precipitation in your area or below normal precipitation in your area? And if you want to back it up with anything, that's fine. Let me know. Todd, you're up first.
Oh boy, put me on the hot seat first.
I do.
Yeah. Well,
it's just us kids.
Yeah. I'm going with near to below normal, and I'm kind of reminded, as you talked about this year, we've had very prolonged and extensive drought through the past winter and the past spring months. And I'm reminded of just a few years ago, kind of looking back at some statistical analysis. This is mostly for Albuquerque, mind you, but we were going through very bad drought back in 2011, 2012 during the winter into the spring months. And statistically, usually those were followed by an above normal monsoon period. But if you recall back in 2012, at least in most of central to northern New Mexico, it was an abysmal monsoon season, just really not much in the way of thunderstorms or precipitation. So that kind of threw out our whole statistical correlation. So I've learned to not rely on that. And then, the way temperatures have been warming lately, it's hard to look for any climate indicators too. But yeah, what I'm going with is a near to slightly below normal. And I'm going to stop there before I dig myself in a deeper hole.
No problem. Mr. John, what do you think is going to happen this monsoon season?
Well, just to differ from Todd, which is a favorite game of mine, I'll go to near and slightly above normal. Now, I really don't have anything to hang that on except for out of the Tucson office, an expert was invited and gave a presentation, and he was showing in one model was saying, well, maybe not such a great monsoon. Another one was saying, oh, we're going to have a great monsoon this season. Tim, you're really being mean to us because the monsoon is very difficult to predict. It's a lot easier to predict cool season patterns like the El Nino that's supposed to kick back in next winter. But the monsoon,
it's tough. It's tough. Let me journey on down the line here. Mr. James, what's your best, I won't say guess, but forecast for this coming monsoon season?
Well, I agree with John. It's a very difficult thing to guess. So I'll turn to my, as you can see, I have a sealed envelope here.
Hi, Karnak, for all you kids out there.
Okay, it's been revealed to me. So for this monsoon season, we're going to actually be looking at above normal precipitations right there, black and white.
All right.
Good. Very good.
There you go.
Just frame that and put that on the wall. Okay, Mr. Carl, what do you think?
I'm going to have to agree with the leaning toward the above normal side of the equation based on what we've seen from CPC. And as John alluded to there with that resident expert that was here talking about the monsoon season, and also with the warmer water off the Pacific, maybe leaning toward more tropical activity. We may be seeing a little bit of a hint of that right now with Bud, but I'm leaning toward hopefully getting toward the end of the monsoon season at least a little bit better than what we have seen of late. So I'm going to go with near to somewhat above normal for the monsoon season.
Very good. And last but not least, I will throw in my 2 cents worth. You know what? I was excited because we had it got so warm there at the beginning of towards the end of May. And that's one of the things that we need to get a good heat low developed to start to draw in that moisture. And I was like, oh, we're getting started early. And then Bud kind of came along and kind of now has messed everything up. But I will also join the majority. So poor Todd, he's out on his own there. But I will go with a near normal to above normal monsoon season. Basically, I've seen the same kind of trends that the CDC has seen. Not CDC. What am I thinking? Is it CDC?
Yeah, Climate Prediction Center.
CPC. See, I was going with the. Oh, there are good friends over at the disease center. So sorry about that. The Climate Prediction Center. Well, they have been kind of signaling at a better than average monsoon season, and it's also one of the challenges as a forecaster. It's real easy to let influence what's happening right now kind of shadow or shade your forecast going forward. So we've got a lot of monsoon and tropical moisture coming in right now. I think it's going to be this way the whole time.
No.
It would seem like that, but we know that that's not going to be the case. And that is some of the challenges that we do have with the monsoon season is that it like I mentioned before, that monsoon plume wavers back and forth. And some days you're under the gun and other days, or maybe even it seems like, why is Arizona getting all the moisture and we continue to dry out here in southern New Mexico or something like that? But it wavers back and forth. I know that John has a fun little game with himself that he likes to see if we can beat Tucson in precipitation every year. But I think we've been losing that, haven't we, John?
We had a few years where it was awesome, but now it's back to normal. And normally, yes, they do beat us. But, Todd may end up being correct for his area.
And that's true.
And if it turns out that he's correct for his area, we owe him something.
That's true. We'll take him out to dinner.
Steak dinner, yeah.
We'll all meet someplace. Well, guess what? It's almost been 30 minutes already, and I've seen most of the people on Facebook are kind of going with a below average. They think that's their opinion, a little below average. So it'll be interesting to see how this year works out. And kind of like John implied, Tucson, Phoenix could have above average. El Paso, Albuquerque could have below average. It's just the way it works. And the key thing is, where does that plume kind of set up, and then how we're able to tap into it. Some years we're able to tap into it much more efficiently, and other years we're not able to. Well, this has been fun. It's been a great Monsoon Awareness Week. It's been, it ended perfectly because we're kicking off monsoon season. Going forward, it'll run through September 30th. And like we've mentioned, doesn't mean we'll see monsoon rains every day, but it just means that the possibility is there for that monsoon flow to join in. All righty. We kind of talked about some takeaways. One thing you want people to be aware of as we go forward, moving forward, one last wrap up as we wrap up Monsoon Awareness Week. Mr. Todd.
I think for me, it's all about being prepared. And we kind of talked about this in the beginning, but as you're heading outdoors, just check the forecast. It doesn't take very long. Just be prepared. Don't put yourself in harm's way when all it takes is just a few seconds to check the forecast, and just respect Mother Nature.
And I think that's a great idea. Respect Mother Nature. That's a good way to say it. John, what's one takeaway, the last takeaway for Monsoon Awareness Week?
Well, and the difficult thing is, you look at the forecast, and most of the days in the summer, it's going to say, oh, there's a chance of thunderstorms in the mountains. Just pay attention to the days where the chances are higher, but don't take for granted that it's going to be totally dry if there are no thunderstorms in the forecast. Be ready and follow those safety rules.
Exactly. Oh, remind me when I get to the end of everybody. I want to show you where some videos are that you all can, everybody watching out at home can use as a resource. James, what's your one last takeaway?
Well, at the end of the day, it's all about safety, because the sun never sets on safety. So keep safety as, number one. Top of mind awareness should be safety. And get your kits prepared. If you prepare a good emergency kit for monsoon season, guess what? You'll actually be able to use that monsoon emergency kit all year long, because if you're prepared for monsoon hazards and emergencies, that kit will be useful to you in the fall, the winter, the spring, and you might even be inspired to go ahead and build a safety kit for your car that's sort of like a miniaturized cartoon version of the one that you have in your house. Mm-hmm. You could set one up for your car too, and put it in a little duffel bag or a little backpack, and just put it in your trunk or in your back seat, and you'll always be ready. And that'll be good for all year long.
Very good. Thank you, James. Carl, what's your one last takeaway?
Kind of wrapping up everything that's been talked about. Basically, you're your own safety officer in reality. So, and as such, you need to be aware of what the weather forecast is. You need to be aware of your surroundings, and to anticipate that, yes, in monsoon season, we have all these hazards, and they can happen at any time. Especially in the afternoon. The afternoon and early evening hours are the peak, at least for thunderstorm activity. And it can strike in the same place more than one day in a row, as we saw here last year, where even in one particular canyon, we actually had rescues happen 3 days in a row.
Oh, wow.
Just due to heavy rains last July, before it finally shut off in August. So you need to be aware. You need to be prepared, as everyone has said. But again, you're your own safety officer, and you got to be responsible for your own safety as such.
Very good. And it does come down to each person taking responsibility, but I'm hoping that everyone's learned a little bit this week. And I did want to walk you through, because each of the offices involved in Monsoon Awareness Week, we put together a video, and it would kind of focused in on one area, whether it was fire weather, whether it was flooding or lightning. And we put them all up on, I know for us, we put them up on our YouTube account. So if you'd like to go track them down, you can go to YouTube and type in NWS El Paso. It'll take you to our page. Click on playlists, and then you'll see 2018 Monsoon Awareness Week. That's all these videos, so the last one will go in there. But then right next to it is Monsoon 2018. That's I think it says 9 different videos talking about the different threats, and it goes over the safety expectations, the different threats, and how they can impact you. So it's a great resource to draw upon there. As far as these videos that each of these offices, we've been tweeting them out and posting them on Facebook, but they are available to you to view, as are the videos, these hangouts we've been doing each night. Well, I thank everybody who joined us on YouTube. Thanked everybody who joined us on Facebook. Lots of great interaction, great questions. I really appreciate all the forecast offices who participated in the Hangouts, especially tonight with John, Todd, Carl, and James. I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your busy schedules to hang out with us and talk Monsoon Awareness Week. So until later, maybe it might be a year from now, we'll be talking Monsoon Awareness Week 2019. But until then, stay safe and stay weather aware. All right, everyone, have a good monsoon season.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a safe summer.